That's it.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
There you go. There you go. Welcome, brothers and sisters, friends and enemies. The Centennial of Malcolm X continues. Welcome to our broadcast. I'm Baba Zaid Muhammad for the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. This is the second of what will be happening every month, the second installment of Revolutionary Fourth Sundays. Will be our ongoing virtual touch point to mark and uplift the centennial of Malcolm X for the entire year. Certainly, we will have some other touch points. We will absolutely be continuing our participation and co-sponsoring of the annual pilgrimage to Malcolm's gravesite. This will be year 60, right? We will also be participating in the building up of the annual commercial moment of silence. That's a beautiful way of saying the shutdown of 125th Street on May 19th. Those are our paramount touch points for Malcolm every year on May 19th. But all year round, we'll be doing some other things. We will be making some inroads into Newark, New Jersey. Several years ago, we had the first touch of what will be our Malcolm X Human Rights Film Festival with a film that we show called Long Distance Runner for Mumia Abu Jamal, in a support role that we played in preparing for Mumia's last major court date. We will be doing films like that in the near future on both sides of the water in the name of the Malcolm X Human Rights Film Festival. In Newark, we will also be doing book signings at which we will be partnering with the Source of Knowledge bookstore on Broad Street, Newark, New Jersey, one of only 2 Black bookstores in the entire state of New Jersey. And Source of Knowledge is a very highly regarded bookstore with a very national reputation that we're very proud to partner with. By hook or crook, we are going to establish our annual Malcolm X Freedom Fighters dinner tribute for our political prisoners. When we do that, it will be renamed after one of our brand new ancestors, Mama Yalu Ferguson, who conceptualized and called for us within the ranks of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee to start that dinner tradition almost 30 years ago now. We are now in our 32nd year, and we're very proud to be in the space that we're in. We've had some other challenges. We've had some banking challenges that took us out of public space with our resources because it tied our resources up. We think we have the means to untie ourselves of that burden, or in the language of Ifa, break the chain of paralysis that we face there, and to get back in live space with our dinner, and again with the Malcolm X Human Rights Film Festival that we're talking about. We have some other things that we're contemplating as well that we may get a chance to touch on later. But February 21st, at about 3:10 p.m., on a cold winter day in 1965, we lost our Black Shining Prince in a way that absolutely should not have happened, but it did. Major interruption of our organizing efforts in the Black liberation movement at that time because we lost our leader, right? We appreciate everybody who stepped up and tried to pick up the momentum, because that even in the loss of his presence, others did try to step up. And the young people of that particular generation stepped up in a way that redefined that moment. There's someone I want to acknowledge, and I'll begin my intro. I want to name some of the founding members of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, who were also members of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and some were also even in the Nation of Islam with Malcolm himself. Baba Herman Ferguson, long live Baba Herman Ferguson, one of the pioneers of the new African independence movement. The Malcolm X Commemoration Committee is very much in the stream and in the tradition of new African independence, one of Malcolm's many original contributions to original revolutionary thought. Albert Herman was the one who brought us together. In the aftermath of Malcolm's death, Herman had two operations: the Big Brotherhood Improvement Association out in Queens and the Jamaica Rifle and Pistol Club, taking the question of self-defense serious. And that became a training ground for a lot of young men and women who would ultimately go into and be responsible for the emergence of the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. Wow, we're getting a shout out from across the big pond. We see you, UNIA. Oh my God. Yes, from across the big pond. But Baba Herman Ferguson then became, as a consequence of his organizing efforts, a major target of COINTELPRO operations, and found himself being targeted for the conspiring to assassinate two civil rights leaders, right? And of course, that was insane and absurd, but it forced Baba Herman into exile, where he went to Guyana, a young Latin American state, black-led, and helped build that organization's both military and educational infrastructure, and retired a full-fledged colonel from the new state of Guyana by virtue of those contributions, but came back to the United States in 1989 in an attempt to clear his name. Of course, the state being what the state is, they took Herman into custody, and he wound up joining the ranks of our political prisoners. But at some point, he found himself in front of a legendary judge from New York State called by the name of Judge Bruce Wright. Judge Bruce Wright looked at the absurdity of what Herman was charged with, and the fact that a man now in his 70s is still in prison, and ordered his release. Not missing a beat, in his 70s, Baba Herman pulled together some of his comrades and some of us, and we became the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. Yuri Kuchiyama, that Malcolm Yuri relationship was just featured at the Schomburg several days ago. Yuri's granddaughter is a dear friend of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee and is owning up to her grandmother's tradition. Butch Gladstone, one of the bravest black men that protected Malcolm in the nation and protected him in the OAAU, one bold, fearless Muslim soldier, right? The Walter Bowe, whose name came up recently in the lawsuit that the Shabazz family is trying to move forward to hold New York City Police and the FBI accountable for their roles in the assassination. Walter Bowe was taken into custody in what was called the Statue of Liberty 4 case. Walter Bowe was a master martial artist, and that compromised Malcolm's inner security circle. But Walter was with us when we started the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. Earl Grant, Malcolm's most trusted confidant, right? And Earl was an engineer by training, created the electrical device that actually had Malcolm tape the FBI when they tried to compromise him in February of 1964. And it shows you how upright and how incorruptible Malcolm is and was. Earl Grant was with us with the beginning of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. And Gene Reynolds, who was also in the Nation with Malcolm, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and with us when we started, and the OAU. Her daughter became a force in the All African People's Revolutionary Party under the leadership of Kwame Ture. So those Malcolm ancestors, we want to acknowledge them right away. Manny Gilliard, who was the succeeding chairperson to Baba Herman's retirement, right? And Keone Siddiqui. Then after that, and most recently, and I've been designated with that task in recent times. We are going through a transformation ourselves. We're going into a 501c3 transformation by virtue of the banking challenges that we have. I want you to know that we have an emerging board that includes our former chair, Keone Siddiqui, that includes Baba James Small, we've been together for forever, and includes Yasmin Majid of the Black Panther Alumni Association. We're looking for, and who's been a big help to us so far. We want to build out that board, and And then and before this year is out, we're going to have a brand new web page and a lot of things that will go with that in the language of this particular contemporary moment, a language I'm not fond of, rebranding. But the work continues. And we're here now today with Baba Zach Kondo. Zach has given I'm having issues with my line, but he's added to
Yeah,
that
because you've been
volume.
going in and out.
I see. He's added to that volume, and we're going to have a serious conversation as to just what that whole thing is about and why it's important. We're dubbing this lessons from the assassination because we want folks to take stock of that. One of the things that I'm supremely proud of about what Zach did was how he did it. He did his investigation from an African cultural lens. And not many talk about the things that he lays out at the end of the book. Lessons from the assassination. What could have been done differently, right? Why do we need to take hold of those things moving forward as new voices of our people in struggle emerge who deserve to be protected to the best of our human capacity to be able to protect them? So those are one of the things that we absolutely want to get into with this incredible scholar as well. So let me just do a brief libation statement very quickly, and we'll get right to work. And before it's all over, our political prisoner spotlight, Kamal Siddiqui, who just turned 72 on February 19th. He is the he was the partner of Assata Shakur, and they have Assata's only child together, and he has been locked up now for almost 20 years by virtue of the same racist judge that locked up Imam Jamil al-Amin. So we're going to do an important update on Kamal Siddiqui to wind up the show. But very briefly, an important libation statement for our ancestors. So the North, the South, the East, the West, we say Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. For the woman who gave from the womb from that Malcolm sprung, from the mighty UNIA, hailing from Grenada, right? And who met her partner in Montreal, and where they married and ultimately gave birth to our Black shining prince, Louise Langdon Norton Little. For Malcolm's mother, we say Ibaye Ashe. For his father, who paid the ultimate price for his commitment, the UNIA. Straight out of Georgia, with a strong 6'4", brave man who ultimately paid that ultimate price in September of 1931 at the hands of the Black Legionnaires, right? Earl Little, the father of Malcolm X. We say Ibaye Ashe, Ibaye Ashe, Ashe. Well, his queen, Dr. Betty Bahia Shabazz, who in the aftermath of that incredible loss put the pieces back together to take care of 6 children and obtain a PhD and become an educational force in Black education circles in New York State and an inspiration to Black women all over the world. For his queen, Dr. Betty Bahia Shabazz, we say Ibaye Ashe, Ibaye Ashe, Ibaye Ashe. For his big sister, one of the forgotten comrades in the inner circle of Malcolm X, who took care of, tried to put the broken pieces of their family back together, right? Helped Malcolm when he was in prison, helped build out some of his programs even before he left the Nation of Islam, paying attention to the cultural wisdom of her baby brother. How to took care of that. And so for Ella Little Collins, his big sister, we say Ibaye Ashe, Ibaye Ashe. And so we give thanks to those incredible elders and some of the ancestors of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee: Herman Ferguson, Lua Ferguson, Yuri Kuchiyama, Butch Gladstone, Earl Grant, right? All of them, we say Ibaye Ashe, Ibaye. So as we began for the North, the South, the East, and the West, Ibaye Ashe, Ibaye Ashe, Ashe. Ashe-o. Welcome, Baba Zach Kondo. Welcome, sir. Can you hear us?
Bob, how you doing?
There we go. There we go.
Yeah. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can. Yes, we can. We're getting a
Yeah.
lot
No,
of traffic.
it's an honor to be here, Baba.
Yeah, and the traffic that we're getting from across the big pond, I am really loving that because this is indeed a Pan-African affair, to be sure. And we absolutely want to lift up the ultimate importance of the Pan-African contribution of our Black shining prince in this conversation and in all conversations that we do here. Now, I started with Malcolm's mom because we're a matrilineal people. Not often do you get to tell your story. We all have our stories on how we were brought to Malcolm, right? I want you to begin, beloved, telling your story and make sure you include the role your mother played in the story of you coming to Malcolm, and then we'll get into the brass tacks of the importance of your scholarship.
Okay. Hopefully, sometimes you're going in and out, so hopefully
I don't know why that is, but you're fine. You're fine. So just keep right on.
Okay, great. Okay, it's fine. Well, I was introduced to Malcolm X when I was 12 years old. Even though I had heard the name before, but I had no context for it. And what I had heard was that one of my older cousins in New York, in fact, in Brooklyn, near Carroll Street, Flatbush area, he had gotten suspended from school because he put a poster of this guy, Malcolm X, on a wall in his cafeteria. And so that was the first time that I kind of heard the name that I have any real conscious memory of. And maybe about a year or so later, I'm in the library. We lived, my father was a military man, so we would go to Fort Eustis a lot. Anyway, we're in the library. I'm waiting for the bus to come, and I'm just browsing the library, not really interested in reading nothing. And I came across this book called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. It was the old book, the real big one with the photographs in it, and he's speaking. It shows him speaking, and the subtitle said he rose from hoodlum, thief, dope peddler, pimp to become the most dynamic leader of the Black Revolution. He said he would be murdered before this book appeared. Anyway, I pulled the book off the shelf and just started going through it, and missed the bus looking at it, and then missed another bus, and then ultimately I had to choose: was I gonna just put it back in the shelf, or was I gonna check it out? And I did the unthinkable for me at that stage. I checked it out. Anyway, I was reading on the bus, and then the next couple of weeks, I read it, and then I read it again. As I remember, I read it 3 times, and something was going on. It led to, my mind was changing, and I was starting to look at things differently. As I look back now, I was in the early stages of developing a racial consciousness. And then after Malcolm, because Malcolm talked about Garvey, so I went to the library and checked out books on Garvey. I went to the library and checked out books on Du Bois. In other words, Malcolm was my entry to the history of African people. And then from there, it was the Panthers and a whole bunch of other people. And I've pretty much been on this trajectory ever since. When I was in school, any opportunity to do a paper, I would do it on Malcolm or something related, or Black radicalism. And this has pretty much been my whole history, from basically middle school through all of my so-called formal education. And so this is where I've been, and this is where I plan to die, on this same trajectory. So I pretty much dedicated my life to the empowerment of our people. As far as assassination is concerned, when I was a undergrad, I read an article, about his assassination. I always had an interest in his assassination, but I read an article in Penthouse, and that kind of put me on this path as far as trying to figure out who killed Malcolm. And so I've been on this path for 40 for roughly for about 43, 44 years, basically. And then it took me 11 years to write the book that you mentioned. That came out in 1993. In 1996, in 2016, I went to England on the invitation with the Kabbalah revivalist movement, and being a part of that kind of inspired me to revise my Malcolm X book. Just those brothers and sisters, their energy, their intellect, their wisdom, their commitment, their structure, their organization. And so 16 to now. So what is that? 9 years. So it's taken me another 9 years to complete the revision. And the revision, the book really should be out by the spring. So we're in the final stages of editing and all that type of stuff. But it basically turns out to be a life's journey. So I've been doing this for 40 something years, but add another 10, 12 years when I was a young boy, and first being introduced to Malcolm.
That wow. And I want to lift up what you just said, and then you're seeing the input and the love that we're getting from Britain, right, for this particular broadcast. Those trips, we often over the years have emphasized, the pilgrimage, the impact in the African world, but the impact he had on Black and Brown London was lightning. It was lightning, and the fact that and we're seeing the fruits of that just in this conversation alone. And I just really, really wanted to lift that up, the impact on that a lot of those folks from the West Indies, that Windward community, right? They were facing the racism that they were facing. Folks from South Asia, right? They were, Malcolm lit all of that stuff up. And of course, the apex of that was his debate at Oxford and his address to the Council of Economic opportunities in London in that those last few months of his life, right? But so that's really profound, and it speaks to the Pan-African dimensions of his legacy. So I just wanted to lift that up and shout out our folks again from across the big pond for being with us. Now, here we are. It's hard to believe. It's hard to envision Malcolm at 60. I mean, at 100, right? And us not being young men anymore, right? We've earned our Baba titles, honestly, right? The assassination, and now what's happening, and this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to have this conversation, is that we're starting to see that date used to celebrate Malcolm's life, which is cool. We can always celebrate his life, right? But he paid the ultimate sacrifice by the giving of his life, and how that went down and what that has to teach us is something that I think we should take stock of regularly. So I absolutely wanted to do that, right? And this year, in his centennial year, we're in an incredibly backwards period politically, locally in this country and around the world with this very violent right-wing trend, right? So, I thought it was important to come back to the lessons of the assassination. Let's unpack for a minute how it went down, who was involved, and then let's also look at, post-assassination generations, what it is that we need to learn from it. And you can take as much range.
Well, the forces that were that were involved in Malcolm's assassination, based on my research, is basically three major forces. You got the Nation of Islam, his former organization, the killers, the men who pulled triggers who basically slaughtered Malcolm. Like, we use the word assassination, we use the word murder when we talk about Malcolm, but really those are euphemisms. Malcolm was slaughtered. And he was slaughtered in front of his family, in front of friends and associates and supporters. So we need to stop playing games, when it comes to how we frame, his death. At any rate, the Nation of Islam were the killers. You got the FBI, who behind the scenes was manipulating and scheming and doing all types of counterintelligence things in order to create schisms and fighting between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam, hoping to get the exact verdict that we got, meaning his slaughter. And then you got the NYPD, who's also in the background, and they're basically working hand in hand with the FBI, just doing what they could do. Their role is kind of two-part. One part of it was basically helping to compromise Malcolm's security. And then the other part of it was, once Malcolm was dead, to pretty much, create a scenario in which Malcolm's true killers would not have to answer, to their role in the assassination. And of course, at the same time, to keep their role and the FBI's role as clandestine as possible.
Now, interestingly, there's some things that have happened recently, right? We just got a shout out for somebody who I love dearly. It means a whole lot to my development. Great Rosemary Mealy, who gave us Memories of a Meeting, Malcolm Meets Fidel. Hugely important contribution to Black radical scholarship, to Malcolm's legacy. And one of my teachers over the years was from the Hartford chapter of the Black Panther Party, and just a great, beacon of solidarity in terms of Black solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. Rosemary, we see you. Thank you. Right. And glad you're there. We got to get you back right into one of these conversations too. She's been with us from the very beginning, a huge personal anchor for me that I wanted to acknowledge. Several things, just very quickly. I can't remember the name of the guy that just checked out, but there was an informant who passed away recently and called himself revealing his role, and not knowing that in his being an informant that he was unwittingly contributing to lay the die for the assassination. I drew a blank on his name right now, but I did an article on
Raymond Wood.
Yes, and I call it the non-confession of Raymond Wood, because he was lying even in that confession when he died and went to hell. Right. Let's look at what this ultimately looked like. We also laid out in another article, unsung warrior in Reuben X. Francis, right? The only person who was armed that day amongst Malcolm's troops, and it was his exchange with some of the assassins that ultimately hit Talmadge Hayer and led to his capture. Had that not happened, by virtue of the collaboration with New York Police Department, every last one of Malcolm's hitters would have gotten away scot-free. And we can't lose sight of that. So I just wanted you to just take a dive and just, what that whole thing ultimately looked like, and why we need to, in our best practices, protect ourselves from being
right. Yeah, the slaughter that took place, in the Audubon on February 21st, 1965, after 3:10 p.m. It was a travesty in so many ways. First, let's talk a little bit about Malcolm's security that day. Here's a man who there have been numerous attempts on his life during the last 4, 5, and 6 months. Hell, going all the way back to the summer. Okay, you got a man just almost every big city he goes to, members of the nation are coming after him. His house was firebombed a week before, and yet we're at the Autobahn, and people who are responsible for protecting him, are not really protecting him. Now, we know Malcolm put restrictions on them. We know that he didn't like people being checked. He said it reminded him too much of his days in the nation, and he wanted to trust his people. And we get that. But my contention, though, is that we still needed to have had people at the Autobahn who, despite what Malcolm was saying, would have taken special measures to make sure that people couldn't walk in there with a J.C. Higgins 12 gauge sawed-off double-barreled shotgun, for example, or so that people couldn't walk in there with a 45 handgun, or to make sure that people couldn't walk in there with a 38 German Luger. Because
what they had, that's right.
Men with these weapons were allowed to walk into the Autobahn on February 21st. And again, we know that Malcolm had these restrictions, but my thing is, hey, Malcolm ain't here right now. Maybe he's in the back room, maybe he ain't. Hey, I'm gonna pat down people any damn way just to be on the safe side, and then deal with Malcolm's, being mad at you later. See, that's what I hope would have happened on that day. And then this is also interesting. Some of the security people that we got posted are members of were members of Jersey Mosque. We had a couple of them. They were members of Jersey Mosque, and they saw the assassins. They're looking at the assassins before the slaughter. They're looking at them, and the assassins are looking at each other, wondering, are they gonna drop the beans on us? And those Jersey guards, they had to know that this was crazy right now, that these people should not be sitting here. And why are they sitting here in the front row? It's like sometimes common sense stuff, when you study the assassination of Malcolm X, could have made a difference. Yes, we know that they noticed Linwood, and they had Linwood, who was a lieutenant, from the Jersey City. But yeah, they brought him up, they talked to him, they asked him to remove his pen. Okay, there was a little bit of stuff going on. But you got two assassins sitting in the front row, and they're packing, and there's no attempt to even bring them to the back and talk to them, or like they did Linwood. So it's these simple things when you study assassination of Malcolm X that bothers me, because had there been, just do that little extra, then at least on that day, we can't account for what could have happened later, but on that day, it would have been much more difficult or almost impossible for them to have killed Malcolm on February 21st. So these are some of the things that's going on. And then you got the New York City Police Department. They have been putting it out there since the summer that Malcolm's, that threats on Malcolm's life were not real, that Malcolm were making them up for, because he was some type of a media hog and he just wanted special attention, but nobody's really coming after Malcolm X. And of course, both the NYPD and the FBI were following that particular line. And and what you're going to see happening is this is going to be an important line, because it's going to help justify when Malcolm is at the Autobahn. It's going to help justify why the NYPD does not have a strong presence. Because what they're going to point to is, hey, we asked Malcolm, but Malcolm would say no. But see, they had predicted that Malcolm would say no because Malcolm didn't trust them. Malcolm Malcolm was looking at all this stuff, like I'll give you an example. On January 3rd, 1964, outside of Malcolm's home in Queens, 2 Muslims that he recognized, Malcolm drove up. They came toward the car when he drove up, and then Malcolm sped off. He later calls the cops and says, I recognized 2 members from the mosque, and he gave one of their names. And then what ultimately ends up happening is the FBI is getting this information, and then their thing is, well, we don't have no evidence that event ever took place. Then when you look at the BOSS documents, the Bureau of Special Services and Investigation, which is the NYPD's counterintelligence unit, they make the same conclusion. So this was a concerted scheme from this point to the assassination that neither the FBI nor the NYPD were going to take threats on Malcolm's life seriously. And that's going to be an important element in the slaughter that took place at the Audubon. Because what ultimately is happening is the NYPD is going to send like 21, a detail of 21 officers. And in the end, they're going to have 2 of them at the Audubon, and 19 of them are going to be sent across the street or down the street, across the street to the Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. So that when the assassination takes place, which, by the way, let's be honest, if you had that type of security at the Audubon, which happens sometimes, but if you had that type of security, the odds that the assassins would have attempted to kill him on February 21st is greatly reduced. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying, simple little things like that, guards closing their eyes, NYPD playing games with security, all of these could have prevented what happened on February 21st, or Malcolm's men not wanting to pat down people, who are carrying, lethal weapons.
I want to just acknowledge some of our couple things. One, Brother Shep has joined us. When we wind this conversation down, he will be doing our spotlight on Kamal Siddiqui, our political prisoner spotlight. I want to acknowledge the other members of the committee, our treasurer, Michael Ferguson, Brother Charles Mitchell, Brother Azakili Mitchell, and Sister Grace Birch, and some of our former members who were with us just recently, Charles Brooks and Zinga Chavis. Let's move forward. Some of the recent things, and this I want to stay on that recent track, things that I know that you felt necessary to add to your scholarship, right? And including these waves of, quote, new developments, right? What are some of the things that we need to look at additionally, that we need to look forward to as you update your volume?
Well, I think one of the things that I've had to do, in this second iteration is, it's been very interesting what the current, and I make a distinction between the current nation and the original nation of Islam.
Yes.
When I say current, I mean the nation that Farrakhan kind of like, rebirthed, if you will, after he left, War of D. Muhammad. But it's interesting to me what's going on there when it comes to Malcolm's assassination. And specifically, what I'm talking about is this. If you go back to the 1990s, particularly 1993, when Farrakhan was at Savior's Day, for all practical purposes, if you analyze the speech that he gave in February 1993, he basically admitted that the old nation, the original nation, basically killed Malcolm. He talked about, every society had zealots, and and when you're hurting, or when you're attacking our leader, zealots rise up, and talked about Malcolm deserved death, just different things like that. And he's our traitor, and how we handle a traitor is nobody's business. All these types of things. He made it clear that, yes, the nation dealt with what the nation defined as a traitor, and they killed Malcolm. And then it gets real interesting, because now we're in the 21st century, and there's a young group of current nation scholars led by Wesley Muhammad. And it's like they're on this mission to basically exonerate the old nation from having anything to do with Malcolm's assassination. And I just find that to be unconscionable. So, and in order to do that, it means what? It means that they have to play with history. They have to play with evidence. They have to lie, cheat, and steal. Because the historical reality is that the nation was a major player in Malcolm's assassination. What these people are trying to do is they're trying to basically, what's that thing that they talk about in the Ten Commandment movie? Moses and the Hebrews had to make straw from something. What is that? Straw from, or something from straw. But the point
I don't know about that, but I do know what historical revisionism is, and that's what we're talking about.
It's exactly what we're talking about. And you know what? It's absurd, because nobody knows more than Farrakhan the role that the nation played in Malcolm's assassination. Now, you were asking me about some new developments. What I think is one of the most important developments is, Les Payne and his daughter Tamara, they published a book about 5 years ago.
Go right ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things that he did, or that they did, was they interviewed a member of Mos 25, one of the Goon Squad members. The Goon Squad was kind of like a subset of the FOI, and they did a lot of the dirty business for the FOI. And the assassins came out of the Newark Goon Squad. So anyway, this brother talked to Wes Payne. And one of the things that he talked about was, he was supposed to participate in the assassination, but he had car trouble and he came late. But he talked about, getting there late, but the 5 assassins were already on their way. So his job was simply to stand guard outside the mosque, and then when one or more of the assassins came, just to let the people know. Now, who are the people? Well, they're in a room in the mosque, and they have people, both men and women, manning the phones. And Farrakhan is one of the people who's there. And if you think about what Jeremiah Shabazz said, who was Jeremiah Shabazz? Jeremiah Shabazz was the longtime minister of Mosque 12, which is the Philadelphia Mosque. Mm-hmm. And he used to be, prior to that, he was also the minister at the Atlanta Mosque. In the early 60s, when Elijah Muhammad had Malcolm meeting with the Klan. Jeremiah was the person who was kind of, meeting with the Klan. Jeremiah was the person who was basically doctoring that whole thing, organizing that whole thing. Later on, Jeremiah is going to be the minister who is going to basically integrate, to a large extent, the Philadelphia Black Mafia into the Nation of Islam at Mosque number 12. That's another story that we can talk about. Anyway, let me get back though. So this guy, he is going to give Payne and his daughter some very important testimony about what he remembers on February the 21st. Like he's going to tell you, for example, when Willie Bradley, who delivered the kill shot into Malcolm, he's the one that fired the J.C. Higgins 12 gauge sawed off shotgun, both barrels into Malcolm's chest at 15 feet. The brother that Payne and him interview, he's going to see when when Willie Bradley got there and how much he was sweating and how he even left the car running. And then he goes into the building and then he comes out, and then all the ministers and other officials from Mosque 25 who were waiting in the room, including Farrakhan, then they all basically moved and they left the building and then got into some cars and then rode around the corner and stuff. Well, this is new information that we didn't know about. But I think the most significant information is from Jeremiah himself. When Jeremiah was dying, Payne got an opportunity to interview him. And at this stage of the game, he's about to meet his maker. He don't care about protecting people. He don't care about loyalty and all of that stuff. And what he basically told Payne was that the reason that Farrakhan, not at the Audubon, but was at Mosque number 25 on the assassination day was because Elijah Muhammad had ordered him. Now, in my original book, I talk about how it was suspicious that Farrakhan left early in the morning Boston and ended up in Newark. So we already knew that. That wasn't new information, but this is what was new. Wow. When Jeremiah was talking to Payne, they wanted to know, well, what was the logic behind it? And what Jeremiah basically told Payne was he said that the messenger, Elijah Muhammad, wanted to bloody Farrakhan's hands. And what he meant by that, and he said, first off, Jeremiah said that Elijah Muhammad was very Machiavellian. He knew how to manipulate people. He knew how to, basically he could outthink people in serious situations like that. So what he did was, according to Jeremiah, is that he had Farrakhan there to be part of the whole thing.
Loyalty test.
So that basically, either Farrakhan was going to have to go one way or the other. Either he was going to have to say, look, I don't want to have nothing to do with this. I'm rolling out. Now that I know why I'm here, I'm leaving. Because according to Jeremiah, Elijah Muhammad didn't trust Farrakhan. He thought that Farrakhan was too close to Malcolm. And in a sense, this was also a test. And so in the end, Farrakhan stayed. But by him staying, it meant that he bloodied his hands. So he can't tell nobody because he's right there and he's not saying anything. And according to Jeremiah, that's exactly what Elijah Muhammad wanted to do. So I was not aware of that, because I never had, access to Jeremiah and stuff. But information like that has been coming out. Oh, something else is also interesting. They were able to interview Joseph. Now, we got Joseph on tape when Spike was doing a movie and stuff like that. So we know that Joseph, before he died, also started talking about the assassination. And basically, he admitted that the nation killed him, killed Malcolm and everything. And he took, Joseph hated Malcolm and he took his hatred to his grave. So, but one of the interesting things, though, that we also knew stuff that I was not aware of is that, okay, the house bombing is interesting because we all know, of course, that Joseph organized the house bombing. He admitted that on tape to Spike. What we didn't know, though, is that Elijah Muhammad initially did not ask Joseph to bomb the house. He initially asked Jeremiah. And Jeremiah ultimately called up Joseph and said, look, the messenger wants me to organize, a house bombing, but I'm in Philadelphia. It's too much stuff going on. Can you do it? And then Joseph probably thinking, well, Elijah Muhammad isn't giving me a lot of faith and stuff, so let me prove to him that I'm worthy of this assignment. But I didn't know that. I did not know that the assignment initially went to Jeremiah, but that he basically, in a sense, he kind of contracted it out, if you will, to Joseph. Something else that I was not aware of. Johnson, now I'd heard a little bit of this. Johnson, who's later going to be one of the men convicted for Malcolm's assassination, Thomas 15X Johnson. Johnson participated in the house bombing. So as much as, we talk about how innocent Johnson and Butler were when it came to Malcolm's assassination.
When his family just got paid.
Time, it wasn't like they were not part.
Wow.
I said it again, Baba?
That is, Johnson, his family just got paid by virtue of what came out of who killed Malcolm X, because that embarrassed the prosecution.
Right. But that was for the assassination. It's unfortunate that the attempted murder, he walked away scot-free for the attempted murder because they never prosecuted anybody for that.
Right.
But the point is that we have more than enough information to acknowledge these facts. Number one, Elijah Muhammad ordered Malcolm's assassination. I've had to spend a lot more time looking at the nation this time than I did the first time. And of course, I did look at it during the first time. But what's real clear is that the nation's high command, from Elijah Muhammad down to Junior, his son, who was the assistant supreme captain of the FOI, all of them were, Raymond Sharif, the supreme captain, all of them, maybe not, I'm not so sure about Ethel. My guess is that Ethel was not part of this. Ethel, of course, for those of you who are unfamiliar, that's Elijah Muhammad's daughter. She was the head of the MGT, and she was also Raymond Sharif's wife. Right. So, right. MGT. So I don't know. I would doubt it that she had much to do with it, but Raymond Sharif, John Ali, Elijah Muhammad Jr., all of them were directing and manipulating and conspiring to basically kill Malcolm before the 1965 Savior's Day. That much is real clear.
Now the timing.
And it's a horrible story, Baba.
Oh my God.
Okay.
And those are some mic droppers with what you just laid out with Jeremiah and with Johnson. We need to appreciate, right? But come back to what Malcolm had in play himself as a revolutionary organizer. The timing of the assassination, right? Today is the birth anniversary, and I should have mentioned him in the libation. And Dawn also recognized that I should have mentioned Joan Gibbs. We had our first meetings at the Center for Constitutional Rights because where Joan Gibbs was embedded back then, right? Today is the birth anniversary of W.E.B. Du Bois. And two things that Du Bois and Malcolm had in common was this whole question of Afro-Asian solidarity. One of the things that there was a major Afro-Asian conference that was supposed to take place just several weeks after the assassination that Malcolm would have participated in had that not happened, had we not lost him. And I've always said that was one of the reasons why the timing matters. Sam Anderson, listen to this, Baba Zach, has also put forward that Bill Epton was a close confidant of Malcolm and who ultimately went into the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party and was a very serious radical scholar. Bill was one of the Statue Liberty 4 targets, that there was some very real serious conversation about Malcolm potentially running for city council as an insurgent. You hear what I'm saying, y'all? I ain't talking about no Democrat or no Republican Party, but ballot or the bullet insurgent, just to amplify his base and to radicalize the That
You kind of froze, Bubba. You froze.
So I just so what would you say about the timing before as we wind down?
Okay, a couple things, Bubba, but you froze toward the end, so I wasn't sure where you were, if you asked the question or not.
Well, I'll go back. I was lifting up the suggestion that Sam Anderson has made about Malcolm being considered as running for the city council as an insurgent, as an independent insurgent. And that was meetings that were supposed to take place immediately after the ballroom, the Audubon appearance that day. And of course, he didn't make those meetings because of what happened. But between that and the Afro-Asian summit that he was supposed to go to a few weeks later, I just wanted you to comment on the importance of the timing of the assassination.
Yeah, well, a couple things. First, let me deal with the Afro-Asian conference. Because this was something that was very significant to the FBI, to the State Department, to the CIA, basically to the Johnson administration. And what was leading up to it was this. Remember, Malcolm spent 24 weeks in Africa and Asia in 1964. He met with 11 heads of states. And the State Department, CIA, they got particularly nervous when he met with African and Asian leaders who the United States was not necessarily calling their friends, specifically countries like Ghana, countries like Egypt, countries like Guinea, with Amon Sekou Touré. And so if you read the files, the State Department, CIA, they're very, very nervous. And their concern is Malcolm is very articulate. Malcolm is very persuasive. Malcolm is very bright. And what if he does get inside the heads of some of these leaders? Would they be open to the possibility of bringing the United States before the UN? See, these things mattered to the United States government, and their documents bear this out. Conversations that they had even with ambassadors in the countries that Malcolm visited. Like for example, they tried to block Malcolm from visiting Mali because they didn't trust where that might go. They didn't want Malcolm in Kenya, even though, let's be honest, we know more about Kenyatta than Malcolm knew. Malcolm viewed Jomo Kenyatta, as a hero and as a leader of the Mau Mau, when history teaches us that Kenyatta was not a leader of a Mau Mau. In fact, Kenyatta didn't even support the Mau Mau. But, so that was less significant. But some of the other leaders, most notably Kwame Nkrumah, they were particularly nervous. And even more nervous when 5 ambassadors in Ghana gave Malcolm a reception, and then when Malcolm was leaving, escorted him, to the airport and stuff. So these were the things that bothered. The fact that Malcolm was interviewing with the Chinese in particular also bothered them, because remember, China had just exploded their atomic bomb, so they were entering the whole nuclear realm. China, was not part of the traditional Cold War because they had nothing to do with the Soviet Union. They never trusted the Soviet Union. And Mao Zedong was basically an independent who was beginning to start organizing in the so-called non-aligned nations and stuff. So they were particularly nervous when it was reported that Malcolm was going to visit that Afro-Asian conference that was scheduled, I think it was scheduled for April of that year. And so they were especially, and more nervous. Why? Because Mao Zedong of China was expected. Castro was expected to attend that very same conference. And remember, as we know previously, Malcolm met in September 1960. Malcolm met with Castro, so he knows Castro. By the way, Malcolm also knows Che Guevara as well and stuff. So all of these things aligning during that upcoming spring, made American officials in the Johnson administration, in the intelligence community, in the State Department, extremely nervous. So as it turned out, the nation had their own agenda. And their own agenda was they wanted Malcolm killed before the Savior's Day, whereas the United States government would have wanted Malcolm killed before the Afro-Asian Conference.
Right.
So, it's a mess, Bob.
Wow. And that's huge. And I want folks to appreciate that, because it's not just how February 21st took place, it's why. It's why. And that lifts up the importance of Malcolm's legacy. So many of us, and all for good reasons, lean on and embrace the Malcolm's ultimate pristine integrity example. And we absolutely should, because that represents the best of our humanity as African people, right? But he was a revolutionary committed to, making our struggle a part of the larger revolutionary struggle in the world at that time, to liberate African people. And we need not lose sight of that, and why that's important at this particular time in our history right now. And let's wind this conversation, and let's go there. Twofold. One, there are some profound things happening on the African continent, particularly in French-speaking Africa, and the fact that the African continent is not only very young, but has the youngest population in the world right now. And we're seeing a Pan-African consciousness surging amongst young people in the African world. And then finally, how you wrapped up conspiracy. Things that we need to take into consideration when it comes to the need to resolve differences and minimize antagonisms that can go the way the assassination ultimately went. People miss that. And that was one of the hugely important things that you did by, I say, doing your investigation through an African cultural lens. We have our ways of resolving differences. Will we honor our traditions in a way to preserve our lives and to preserve our missions? That is the real question. So bite at those two apples, and we'll wind down. This has been a great conversation too, by the way. And I want to thank everybody who's been chiming in. The traffic from abroad, we love it. Pan-Africanism will perish. We love that. And I want folks to look forward to a conversation we're looking to develop with a young scholar over there, Kahindi Andrews, right? Who's got a book coming out, Nobody Can Give You Your Freedom, right? Dedicated to Malcolm. So there are some young brothers and sisters trying to figure this thing out too. And we want to lift them up and do all we can to support them in the raising of their voices and bringing us a fresh take on why these matters are important. Go ahead, beloved. Let me let you respond to what I asked you.
Yeah, in the original autobiography, in the original book that I wrote on the assassination, in the epilogue, I had I think it was 12 lessons, that we should derive from Malcolm's assassination. I've answered another one deals with how we can heal from Malcolm's assassination.
Yes,
but at your request, I'm just gonna real quickly just kind of go through with the lessons and stuff. The first one was that as Africans, we need to go through extraordinary lengths to protect and to defend our leaders, and that we can never rely on outside forces to do that. There specifically, I was thinking about, the whole NYPD, and they had a role, if you will, in Malcolm's assassination, in part because we were looking for them to provide Malcolm with security. We should never have relied upon our enemies to secure our leaders. Number two, we need to be able to resolve family problems and personal differences in private and not go public. And both Malcolm and the nation, particularly, the nation started it, but Malcolm fed into it. We started airing our differences in public. That gave our enemies more of an opportunity to exploit.
Yes.
Number 3, we must hold our leaders accountable for their actions and never place them above criticism or scrutiny. And I think that was one of the mistakes that the nation made. They put Elijah Muhammad on a pedestal, and therefore, when you put people on pedestals, you can't critique them. And in the case of Malcolm, to critique him was to put himself in mortal danger. We got to get past that stuff. That's silly stuff. Number 4, we must accent our similarities and positives over differences and negatives. Just a simple antidote. Number 5, we must tighten eternal security, and we must constantly develop infrastructures within our organizations to prevent infiltration and other external disruptions.
Let me stop you there for a minute, because this is something that I had to deal with, especially when I had the responsibility of running the new Black Panther Party in my area. There are some red flags when it comes to these things, right? Malcolm made a 180-degree turn on the whole question of sexism, right? One of the flags that we have seen with FBI informants and provocateurs is this ultra macho kind of thing, where folks are trying to assert their leadership credibility by being overly zealous about engaging in violence and in abusing women. It's something that definitely reared its ugly head in the Black liberation movement afterwards. When we saw that in the assassination of Fred Hampton, some of the things with the Coweta movement, we've seen this thing, and it's important to appreciate. The other is that if your organization has a discipline, stick to it. And no one should be above accountability when it comes to your organization's discipline. That keeps everybody accountable, and that checks reckless behavior that tends to come from operatives who try and set people up by getting folks to engage in behavior that is undisciplined and outside of an organization's agendas. I just wanted to put a pin in that for the young organizers that are paying attention to this conversation. Go ahead, proceed.
Oh, good, Bobby. We appreciate that. Okay. Another lesson. We must place emphasis on our leaders' teachings, actions, and examples rather than on their personalities. And here I'm specifically talking about the cult of personalities. History teaches us that whenever we got cult of personalities being a driving force behind a leadership or behind an organization, it never serves the best interest of our struggle. Number 8, we must always leave communication lines open. One of the ways that the enemies were able to inflame the tension between Malcolm and the nation was that there were gaps when it came to communication between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad, particularly during the isolation period. And then even down the road, there was not much contact between them. That's what allowed the enemy to do counterintelligence schemes and put forth little things, that sometimes, you could stop a counterintelligence scheme by just getting on the phone and saying, hey, I got that negative letter that you wrote me. Huh? I ain't write you no negative letter. Yeah, I got it right here. I'm going to read it to you, blah, blah, blah. Simple things like that could begin a dialogue during the COINTELPRO era that could ultimately have prevented the enemy from having a successful scheme.
Let me add to that
Number
too,
9.
because I wanted to build on that point too, because that's also very important. One of the things that is important and this is a contemporary place where Malcolm is right now in our streets. I work at what's called community-based violence intervention, right? Newark is one of the cities that has really pushed ahead in that particular strategy to reduce violence in our community. We've reduced violence in Newark to a 60-year low by virtue of that kind of work. And that work involves credible messages, brothers and sisters who have been out in those streets, really doing some things and have ties to all the organized networks and whose voice and history and credibility matters in having conversations as to what's actually happening on the streets in a given current moment, right? And those channels of communication are hugely important in the, quote, squashing of beefs and the prevention of unnecessary retaliations and escalated incidents of violence when they actually occur. And they're very important. And we would also want to say that Malcolm is the father of our credible messengers. One of the things that we want to do going into this year is making sure our CVI spaces are properly appreciating the ancestral shoulders that they need to stand on to do their best work. I want to acknowledge Bashir Akinyele, one of the founders of All Politics Are Local, and it was one of our best soldiers in the new Black Panther Party, and he was an education legend. And when we were all created the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, Bashir was right out in front of that, and he's somebody who's really important, an important voice in our community on that particular front. I wanted to acknowledge that good soldier as he joins this conversation as well. Now, go ahead and finish up.
Okay, Bob, no problem. We must be conscious of the enemy's never-ending campaign to destroy and neutralize forces working to liberate and empower us. And we must never underestimate the intensity and magnitude of this campaign. So put another way, we must never forget that our enemies are constantly at work. Even when we're asleep, they're constantly at work trying to figure out ways to neutralize us, ways to destroy us, ways to disempower us.
Sun Tzu, who gave us the Art of War, would agree with you 100% on that. Go ahead.
Exactly. We must always demand that our leaders resolve eternal problems without damaging and confusing the larger community or struggle. And again, that's Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. Once the cat was out the bag, we used the white newspapers to air our differences.
Yes, sir.
Number 11, we must always we must always demand. Okay, we must always demand truth from our leaders and never forget that this is a right rather than a privilege. So our leaders should be held accountable to always tell us the truth. And then the last one I have, even though I think I might have skipped the early one, but it's we must not transform mortals into immortals. In other words, any groups that take people who are human beings and basically transform them into deities. And organizations, of course, like the Nation did that. Why? Because you can't critique deities.
Yes,
you can't criticize deities.
Yes,
people will sacrifice their lives in order to defend deities. So history teaches us that doesn't work for our struggle.
It was indeed one of the operative, factors in this whole thing too, that great students of the assassination would all agree with on that. As we wind down, I want to thank you profoundly as always, and I'm very proud of what you get ready to do. Take a minute, let me do some updating. Also, as we wind down, I want everybody to look forward to our next Revolutionary Fourth Sunday, which will be on March 23rd, and we will have a revolutionary conversation about reparations. Roger Wareham of the December 12th movement, one of our warrior lawyers on the reparations front, who played a major role in the World Conference Against Racism, where we insisted that the question of reparations be taken seriously in the international arena. Omali Yeshitela of the Uhuru movement, the International Democratic Uhuru movement, who just survived a major charge, right? Who could have gone to prison in his 80s, right? And yes, Brother Johnson, it will be available through this very same medium. So our folks from across the pond or wherever they have access to YouTube and Facebook can absolutely access it. Yes, and we look forward to your appreciation. In fact, there's a sister over there we've been trying to get hold of on that front too. We look forward to that. Shep has some technical difficulties. Bobby Shep has some technical difficulties. Some important updates around Kamal Siddiqui. February 19th was his 72nd birthday. He's done over 20 years in prison on a wrongful conviction. His health has been failing. He is coming up for parole for the first time in July. So there's going to be a major push that we are all going to share throughout the country to mobilize as much support as we can for him as he goes through that process, right? And that's going to be difficult, and it's hard to get somebody over on their first bid for parole. Even Malcolm couldn't get his first bid for parole. He didn't get out on his first bid for parole, but it is the beginning of an opening through conventional legal channels. So we want folks to look forward to that. There will be a major in-person event that will be set up for Baba Kamal on March 8th, right? Ironically, the anniversary of the Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier fight. Follow us on Facebook, and I apologize for my connection issues. I don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah, no problem.
For our work and the work that we share from around the country, and work
But
is
the music
all over the country. Can you hear me? No, the music should go off. I want to
yeah, I
acknowledge
can hear you.
also.
Hey, Baba, are you playing this music in the background?
No, it's coming from. I don't know where
Are
that's
you
coming
playing
from.
this music in the background?
No, sir. No, I don't
Okay,
know where that's
wow.
coming from.
Okay, it stopped.
But I want to acknowledge also the Afro-descendant community of Spain, right? We've been getting some really good feedback from around the world around these conversations and the need to make Pan-African solidarity something very real for us. So follow us on Facebook. We do a post a day, we'll do every year for the Centennial, and lifting up this history. This conversation will be available on both our Facebook and YouTube pages, and we appreciate everybody that has been chiming in. And hopefully next time we get together, I can figure out why my connection is so wishy-washy. I want to thank Rafisa Shahabuddin, an excellent, sharp local educator that we're very proud of, who's a part of our team here at Malcolm X Commemoration Committee and All Politics are Local, who's actually walked me through this conversation. Very grateful to her and looking forward to her continued contributions on the education front. That front is one that we must always seize and be very present in, especially as our education comes under attack. The best educating we have done for our people and with our young has not happened in public school classrooms. It's happened in community, and it's happened in struggle, in what we call political education. And we need to make sure that we are honoring those free spaces of an institutional and organizational kind that we own to take care of our young and make sure we're giving them the proper direction. So we want to thank everybody. Follow us on Facebook, Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. March 23rd, the reparations conversation. April 27th, fourth Sunday in April, we have a very serious police brutality conversation with Melina Abdullah of Black Lives Matter Grassroots and Kamal Franklin of Community Movement Builders, who's been raising hell around this whole question of Cop City. And on African Liberation Day, May 25th, Herb Boyd and Don Rojas, Malcolm and the CIA. The Centennial of Malcolm X continues. Solidarity, building the united front to protect ourselves and defend ourselves from this right-wing attack is the order of the day, right? We appreciate you. Thank you, Baba Zach. As soon as that book gets available, we're definitely going to put that on big blast, right? Because it is an important tool in the tradition of Black radical scholarship, Black radical scholarship, which is something that we all must lift up. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the whirlwind. X as in Malcolm is the answer. Thank you.